is this? A notebook? What you need is a 2-in-1 laptop with the speed of Intel's 6th Gen Core processor. Best Buy's blue shirts make it easy to get back to school with the best tech. Tech to impress at Best Buy. Intel's 6th Gen Core processor. Best Buy's blue shirts make it easy to get back to school with the best tech.
Welcome to the live Mayoral Forum post-show.
Post-game analysis.
Yeah, post-game analysis. Wanted to take a moment and just kind of basically say thank you to all of the individuals who went into trying to do today's forum. I was impressed. I don't know about you as far as how it went.
I actually attended it. I know you were back here watching the live stream.
I was here. I was scratching.
As I was, I came back and I said I took copious notes.
Yes.
And I have I do actually have a new appreciation for the art of the reporter. When you're trying to scribble and scratch and get information out, especially in a live setting that's that unscripted essentially to some degree. But before we go into that, you wanted to say something about some people that.
Well, I want to say thank you to Jeff Kirk for allowing us to do the show here at Wise Point, down 62 Broad Street,
downtown Alex City. Historic Alexander City.
Human and Business Solutions, which is my company. I know you're over at the chiropractic place. It'd be perfect to say something about it at this point in time.
I'm not technically.
Since we're not since we're not paying you here.
It's on my shirt.
I know, since you're not paying. But I wanted to say, awesome job by the young professionals tonight by taking the initiative to go out and put this together so that people can be educated about what our future leaders want to say and want to do.
And one of the things, you and I have had this discussion, we've been friends for a number of years. We've been through these elective processes on local and national events before, so that this isn't a new forum for me and you to sit here to talk about things. You and I have been on opposite sides of the fence, same side of the fence, on the fence together on things, and one of the great things about that, we can always walk away and agree to respect one another.
And we're not going to hate each other.
No, we don't do that. So, but it's because we respect each other's education, and when I say education, I don't mean I went to college or high school. I mean, we have each taken the time to learn. And one thing I want everyone to remember, always remember, the word vote comes from the word voice. It literally means voice. When you vote, you are letting people hear your voice. We have August the 23rd.
And I'm going to quote someone.
Go for it.
Obama had a wonderful quote. Don't boo, vote.
There's a comma there. You made that comment to me one day.
Don't boo.
What's a boo vote?
But the reason for that is, no matter how much you may dislike what's happening, you can sit there and criticize all you want.
That's right.
But if you don't go vote, you really need to shut up.
Well, you can't even shut up because you haven't really spoken.
You haven't said anything.
That's right. It matters.
That's good.
And the vote is what matters.
So let's go ahead, and you've done by the way, excellent job by Dr. King, I believe.
Yeah, great job.
She did a good job of kind of keeping our folks on track. I know that there were some issues about some of the questions and them being able to hear it. And
I think the monitor speaker was a little low for some of them.
She was very professional. Her and Lacey took care of making sure that everybody stayed on track. Lacey's a good person, and I know that they weren't going to say anything bad to Lacey, because then all of Alex City would go after her.
That's right.
Bottom line.
And kudos to Dr. King when she was there. She's tremendous resume. She's got many degrees, Kent State. Now she teaches at Auburn University. And
smart woman.
Yeah, and did a great job. Despite having a little bit of a cold and a sinus thing going on,
we don't know anything about it.
Just kind of manned up and did that. So
manned up?
Well,
how about womaned up?
Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want the ladies that's watching to come after you tomorrow or something.
Well,
tell me a little bit about the format.
The format was, I like the format.
It was different, I have to admit.
Yeah, it was, because it was not a debate. I think there was a misconception on some people's part that we were going to have a debate.
Yeah.
And it was not that was not the plan. That was not the forum. It was set up as a question answer period. And so what they did, they went through, first each candidate had a few minutes to introduce who they were.
Okay.
And basically introduce themselves to the public. Now, I, like you, know who each of these gentlemen is, have either a personal or a professional or both.
I did not know Neighbors until tonight.
Well, I've known Mr. Neighbors. I've attended church with Mr. Neighbors.
Okay.
So I do know Mr. Neighbors and his family. I'm good friends with his family.
For me, this was my first introduction to
That's right. And I think for me, I'm going to agree with that, because this was my first introduction to, I've known, as I said, I've known Mayor Shaw as our mayor, and as a councilman before that. Mark Fuller has always been the Marine Police to me. That's been his job, and done a good job at it. Mark Lamborn has always been Bill's Electric to me. So now I'm looking at Mr. Neighbors has always been the father and father-in-law of good friends of mine. But I'm looking at them now in a completely different light. I'm not looking at Mayor Shaw as the mayor. I'm looking at him as the potential new mayor.
As a candidate.
As a candidate.
Right.
I'm looking at Mr. Fuller, Mr. Lamborn, and Mr. Neighbors the same way. So what they did, they each went through, introduced themselves, and that was a random drawing they determined several weeks ago. Then they were each asked questions, specific questions related to municipal affairs and the job of the mayor, mayoral responsibilities. So, and they were all asked the same questions, and they had just about 60 seconds. And I think they might have changed that, because I had 4 questions in 2 minutes.
I was noticing that in my deal, because I had gotten a little preview of how they were going to do it, and I had that they only were going to do about 4 questions.
And I got, and I do have 8 questions here, but it seems like it, maybe they did.
And actually, they ended up covering more than I thought they would have.
And finished early.
Yes.
Which is unlike most government deals.
Well, it's not a government-run situation. So
not yet, right?
Right.
So anyways, they had 8 questions that were pre-planned, pre-submitted, that they knew they were going to get. And then they had some resident...
Now, did they get the questions beforehand?
I don't know for sure if they were given those questions before.
Okay.
I don't know. It was a question I had. Some of their answers sounded prepared, but of course these were not
new issues.
No, yes sir,
right.
They're not new issues. So they've heard these questions somewhere, somehow before today. Then the residents and the audience actually submitted questions. Now some of the questions were submitted by residents who had emailed in or dropped them off to the young professionals, and then some actually you could fill out a questionnaire, a card at the door, and submit the questions, and a couple of those I believe were chosen.
Okay.
Because of their pertinent importance. And then each candidate was given originally 3 minutes. They actually gave them 5 minutes for closing remarks. Now,
and some of them didn't use all of that.
No. And one of the things that they did, they were very outspoken about from the beginning, the moderator, was that none of the time question answering period was for rebuttal. So if you said something I didn't like, I had to answer the question. The rebuttal was at the end. The rebuttal was the last 5 minutes. That's when you could rebut statements, comments made by other candidates, either toward you or toward, for example, Mayor Shaw's current administration or issues there, or other outside of that. Okay. So if the others. So the rebuttals were saved to the end. So and it actually was very professional. Everyone was relatively gentlemanly, I think. There's a few sparks fly here and there, but that's part of the process.
Yes.
That we have going on. So
now you were there.
Yeah, big crowd.
Tell me about the crowd.
I was a little surprised. I was told they set up 500 to 550 chairs. I heard both numbers, so I don't know which one. I was just asking around me, and one person said 500, one person said 550. I've been to Betty Carroll Graham for a lot of programs over the years, the Technology Center, and I've seen it packed full. I would say it was at 80% capacity of those chairs. I'm just guessing. I'm going to guess 375, 400 based on the empty chairs. Now, I'll say this, and Jeff Kirk pointed this out just before we went live. When you look at the video as it's shown of the moderator
I was going to say.
Yeah, the candidate view made it look like you were looking down an empty aisle with just a few people there.
Yeah.
Not the case.
It was a little deceptive.
Yeah,
now, I will say, and Jeff will probably have to tell me because he's our technical guru.
Right.
We averaged about 46 people that viewed it on average.
Yeah, it ended up with 66.
They ended up with about 66 people online
Viewing
that were watching. So that's not bad. I mean, that you got to remember, this is new technology doing it online.
Someone asked me, they said, is it going to be on Channel 3? And I said, no, it's not going to be broadcast.
Actually, it is.
It wasn't. They did.
Yeah.
It was on cable?
Yeah.
I thought it was only YouTube.
It was on internet, TV, radio, and live.
It was on 97.5?
Yes.
Why? See, I didn't know that. I was uninformed.
Well, that's the key of being.
So you're saying they had that
all
many
mediums.
YouTube viewers?
Yep.
That doesn't include cable television, right?
Correct.
They could have had hundreds of thousands.
Well, yeah, right.
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 Local people tuning. So it was I thought it was a well represented crowd.
I was impressed that we got a lot of people this time interested on multiple levels.
But I'm going to say something about the crowd, and this is this is an observation,
okay.
Right? And you may be able to speak to this for me. You and I are very candid with each other about a lot of things. We don't hold back a lot, but I was not there. There was not a ethnic diversity in the crowd. Very small representation from the black community.
I know, and I've told you this. For some reason, they don't really go to.
Now there was a number there that people I know, friends I talked to. But when you look around the crowd, the diversity was not now maybe they watched on television. They didn't come live.
Could have been one of the 66.
Could have been on the radio. So that being, maybe they already know what they're going to vote for, and this forum meant nothing for them, and a lot of other people too. I don't know. I just happened to look around, and I kind of made a quick scan of the crowd to see age, population, racial profiles of people out there, etc.
Are you trying to profile?
I did profile.
Okay.
If you based everything on the audience there, it's primarily a white crowd.
Okay. Well, see, and I wasn't there, so I couldn't say.
And I'll tell you this: it was primarily a middle-class white crowd.
Really?
And yeah. Yep.
Well, let me stop for just a second and do some housekeeping. One of the things that I want to put out there is if you want to ask us a question or have us put a comment out there, do so by either commenting on doing a live chat on the YouTube live channel under this deal, or you can go to our Facebook account and you can send us a Facebook message through the Alexander City Promise Facebook page, and we'll try and see if we can answer your question, or if you want to throw a topic out for us to try and get to. But one of the things that I wanted to kind of focus on just for a second was if you were looking solely at performance at this point in time. Now we're going to dive deeply into the different candidates and some of their answers and some of the issues. What would be the order that you would put them in from a performance? I'm going to let you say yours and I'm going to say mine, and we'll kind of go. Now, I graded them based upon not how I felt about them, not who I may or may not vote for. This was strictly how did they perform
in this forum,
in this setting tonight.
These questions, right. This is my observation.
Okay.
All right. I would have to say that personally, I believe that Mr. Lamborn probably rose to the top in overall tonight in performance. I was very impressed with the directness of Mark Fuller's answers. That I liked. I was very impressed with Mr. Neighbors, his resume and financial savvy. I liked it a lot too. Mayor has had 4 years to let us know what he can do and what he will do. So I think his position was very obvious before we got there and going in.
And I would say I'm gonna flip 1 and 2 in my list.
Yeah.
I think that Fuller, for me, on the questions, like you said, was more direct, more. I felt as if he had a better grasp of the totality of the issues and was able to speak on them, and he stuck to a theme.
I would say I saw that with Fuller and Lamborn.
And that's what I'm saying. I think that it's fair. I think that the fairest thing to say is performance-wise, it's not a whole lot between Fuller and Lamborn in that 1 and 2 spot.
Yeah. Now when we got to some of the questions, I saw some differences.
That's what I'm saying. From a content issue, it's a different story.
Then they start to fan out.
Right. But from just the performance of standing there, performing, talking, and putting everything out there, I think that it would be a close 1 and 2. And I think for both of us to kind of come at it from 2 different directions.
Right.
And see you being there, me being on the internet and looking at it.
You needed to go and I needed to stay here, and so you could help increase the
see, you being funny.
The diversity.
But I think it's funny though that both of us put Neighbors and Shaw in kind of the same spot. And the only reason why I did Neighbors the way I put him in that spot is because I didn't get the feeling that he really answered some of the questions.
Right. And I almost think that, and I'm going to just go out on a little limb here.
Okay.
But I know Mr. Neighbors has an extensive resume. It's stellar. I mean, he's qualified to do many, many things. Some of which we need to deal with here in Alexander City. But I almost felt like, to a small degree, if we sat down with him in a room and asked him those questions, we would see a different response than in that public forum.
And that's the reason why I said based upon just performance. Because, and I'm not taking away from any of them as far as where they are.
We're just saying
even Mayor Shaw. And the only reason why, and this is my explanation for putting Shaw in the 4th spot, was because it seemed as if he was on the defensive, and it was more of just the same versus this is what I want. I looked at him as a brand new candidate. Right. And what will you bring to the table as a brand new
candidate? I think at some level you have to grant Mr. Shaw a little bit of credence in this thing. And again, because he did go into it on the defensive. There was a lot of
things that have happened over the last
there's a lot of dust in the air right now that I'll give him some credit for being able to walk into there and just to be able to speak publicly like that.
And that's I guess that is the point that I was going to make. If nothing else, you give him that meritorious service award just for the fact that after it being in battle all week
with what he's had to deal with.
You got to give him that.
And I'm going to say this too, and I think this was brought out. I don't know if this was public knowledge, but Mr. Neighbors pointed out he had his sister. He buried his sister this morning.
He did.
And so we're going to give him some points also there for some extenuating circumstance points.
I'm good with that
because that's a tough situation, and credit to him that this was important enough to him that he could be with his family and do that in the morning and then come back and handle this tonight.
So before we get into the individual candidate analysis, let me just kind of throw out. A lot of people don't know that on Alexander City Promise page, and also on the Centrist web page, and on my own profile, we had done a election poll right after qualifying, and I've made individuals force rank the mayors and the city council people. And I did that because I wanted people to tell me first, second, third, and fourth place as it stood before information went out.
Before this forum.
Any information went out. And at the time, Jim Neighbors had a pretty good little lead overall. Mark Fuller was second. Mark Lamborn was third, and Charles Shaw was fourth. And that's with about 40 people that had participated in that, and it's completely random. I mean,
I was going to say you have no
idea who's going to take it, what they're going to do.
Someone do it 12 times.
Right. Now, I'm gonna kind of skip ahead because we got 4 other races on council, and since this was done then, I'll go ahead and make it public as far as what the 4 are. We're gonna revisit this in the next couple of days.
Yep. Thursday night.
Yeah, okay. In the next couple of days. But in District 1, Bobby Tapley came in with a resounding first place deal. Second choice was Steve Crow. Third choice was Beverly White at that time. Mm-hmm. That's District 1. District 2, Audrey Buffy Colvin was in first place, or first choice. Jacob Meechan was second choice at that point in time. And Sherry Ellison Simpson was third choice at that point. In District 4, Eric Brown was a pretty much runaway, with Frank Tapley coming in second, and then Billy Ray Wall third at that point in time. And in District 6, you had almost a statistical dead heat between Jason Krumer and Tim Funderburk, and Tony Harris at the end ended up coming in third place. So that
was a whole pile of pens.
Yeah, that's right. But that's how that initial, I call it almost a favorability poll.
Let me ask you this: are there any other polls out there that you are privy to?
Not that I've seen.
Has the Outlook done one?
I haven't seen anything else.
That's our local newspaper.
Yes.
If you're not local, I'm just curious because where that would compare to other, because if I I don't think I've shared that on my Facebook. I need to. Right. I'd love to share that.
Well, and that's the thing is that it was just randomly shared, randomly whatever. So it wasn't like it was a specific group at any point in time. Anybody
just popped up there, and whoever
anybody could have affected those numbers at that point. Now, what's interesting is since that particular deal, Jim Neighbors in the poll that we just ended today, Jim Neighbors was still first place. Mark Fuller was still second. Mark Lamborn was third, and Charles Shaw was fourth. But the numbers were so much significantly different, and Jim Neighbors pretty much was at 56% of the respondents at that point in time.
Interesting.
As opposed to Mark Fuller and Mark Lamborn. Basically, Mark Fuller had 24% and Mark Lamborn at 14%. Does that possibly mean that Mark Fuller and Mark Lamborn are taking each other's votes at this point in time, possibly?
Well, I don't know. I think that you're going to see a lot of people. Things like the forum tonight, I think, is going to change a lot of people's minds.
Yes.
I don't think, well, let's not say a lot of people's minds. There's certain people's minds.
There's some that may have come up. I talked to a couple of people, actually, right afterwards and sent them a text message and said, okay, what did this do for you? Because I asked them what, and by the way, the people that I had sent something to had Fuller and Lamborn kind of in that top spot. Mm-hmm. I did have Neighbors second in a lot of different areas. Mm-hmm. And I was just interested to kind of see. Which is interesting because the poll you've got there is very different than what you saw live performance tonight. Precisely.
And I think tonight there was a lot of information disseminated, which we'll get into here in just a moment, some of the questions and the answers that change people's views of candidates possibly, simply for the fact that some of the questions weren't answered as directly as maybe people wanted. Now, I don't know if that was nervous in front of people, you're kind of on the spot, if it excuse me, there's a lot of factors that play into it. I've been in live, you and I have done live television for a long time, and there's a lot of factors that play into it. So
and in the last survey that I just wanted to pull out, I asked about if the Centrist webpage and the Alex City Promise webpage help keep you informed. 90% of the individuals that took it, about 40 people again, that took it said yes. Have you seen the videos and posts on Facebook and Twitter? 82% said yes, 18% said no. Keep it in mind, these are social media people.
Right.
So these are people that are in social media, active, whatever. Interesting question was question 3. What influenced your vote? You and I talked a little bit about this off camera. Mm-hmm. Personal relationships, social media was 2. Traditional advertising such as TV, radio, and newspaper was 3. outside advertising, which is your yard signs and billboards, and then 5, just anything else that might have affected you. Oddly enough, personal relationships was number 1.
Yep.
Whether that be family, friends, the candidate coming and just sitting down with you or whatever.
I think I said this as we came on. It's I have a personal and professional relationship at some level, some more than others, with all 4 of those gentlemen.
Right.
You know, I'm a business owner in the city, so I have direct ties to them in different ways.
But the interesting thing was social media
right.
came in second.
Well,
and you had an interesting answer.
It is, and I think my opinion of that is, and you have to understand this when I say it, but social media is one of your friends now. And I don't mean that like Facebook friends. What I mean, though, we look to social media for advice. We look to social media for direction.
Right.
We look to social media to share things with. Many of the roles traditionally met by an individual, a friend, call up Sean and ask you a question. Now we post it on Facebook. So in a sense, social media has filled the slot in some ways, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong, I'm saying it's what's happened. Social media has filled a slot of a friend in your life.
Well, it's the closest thing to getting information that you want to know about without having to wait on something to come out or something. Mm-hmm. I mean, the newspaper, the TV, whatever. They can go back and reference that without having to go and buy something.
Right. So it really puts you in a place of it's easy to gain information.
The last question, which is interesting, and some would argue that it doesn't really mean anything, but when I got to thinking about it, it says, does the candidate signing the promise, the Alexander City promise statement, affect your vote in it? Now, 62% of the individuals said, no, it doesn't affect it. 38% of the individuals said yes.
And I'd be curious it'd be fun to kind of sleuth or hound dog that out a little bit, because there may be people who say, I don't even know what the Alex City Promise is. And I happen to know what it is because I know you. We spoke about it back. You actually asked my opinion about it when you were putting it together.
Right.
And the concept of the promise was essentially a bulleted list of items, issues, and prospective changes that need to take place in Alexander City, and it was simply a consistent list of things that you would ask a candidate to adhere to.
And there were 4 different areas: financial accountability.
Yeah, which is huge right now. That's the elephant in the room.
Promote open government.
Yep.
And
transparency.
Infrastructure. We've been talking about roads, internet, everything else forever, and positive government and job growth.
Right.
What would you not? I mean, that's the 4 major issues that
for all candidates in all offices.
All offices.
Whether you're running for the Boy Scouts, treasurer, or you're running for the President of the United States.
Correct. So, but I found it interesting that at least 30 to 40% of the people said, that commitment, or at least acknowledging that those 4 areas are important,
right,
might be something that I take into consideration. Again, all we can do with the piece of paper is nothing's going to happen to them if they don't do it.
No. But it does send a message.
It sends a message.
I think when you spoke to me about it originally, that was the point you were making. Is hey, I want people to know that these candidates are sending the message that they stand for these things.
All right. So which candidate do you want to start with first?
Well, do you want to start with candidates? Or you want to start with questions?
Either way.
I think the easiest way to do this is sort of roll through some of the questions,
okay.
Hit the ones we want to hit and miss the ones we don't feel
Sounds good.
Are quite as important.
First question was, what is the first priority as mayor, and what would you do when you got in office, basically? Paraphrasing the question.
Right. What was the plan?
Yeah.
I got it down. I wrote it down here. What is your first priority as mayor, and what specific actions would you take to address that?
Yeah.
I'm just going to say this. I think Mr. Shaw probably had a poor choice of words here, and I don't think it was intended quite as maybe it came across. His statement was, first thing was, continue as we've been.
You know, it's funny. I have the exact same.
I have a strong, probably, opinion that when he said that, he wasn't talking about the negative things that are going on. He's talking about the positive, because he immediately said, working with department heads and EDA.
And he gave a litany of stuff that he had done in his opening statement.
Which interestingly, later on, Mark Fuller, I believe it was Mark Fuller, came back and said, well, I was on city council when some of those things, we started those things, and they just crossed the finish line under his leadership, which you still have to take into the fact that a lot of these projects are long-term.
Correct.
That's how they work.
It's like a president.
Exactly.
President starts stuff, and about 8 to 12 years later,
30 years later,
it becomes an issue.
Right. But I think that those words were probably poorly chosen on his part, and unintentionally had a double meaning. And I heard a little titter in the crowd that was probably.
Well, it was a tough quote to come back from.
It was
on that particular.
That's why I said, I looked at my dad. I said, "Oh, that wasn't the best words."
Neighbors said, "Restore faith in city government." That seemed to be his theme.
And one of the things he said he wanted to do with that was to bring some of his associated experienced people that he knows as experienced associates of his team. For council.
A team.
For council.
Yeah,
right.
team.
I don't think, and then again, he didn't mean city council.
Right.
He meant personal council. Mark Fuller said,
he jumped right in.
Oh yeah,
he jumped right in.
Headlong with both feet.
Both feet, pull the plug.
Get the financial situation in order, complete an audit, and then this is Mark Fuller we're talking about. And terminate and prosecute to the full extent of the law, and remove someone if there's any doubt.
What else would you have expected from an officer?
That's right.
And we're going to talk about their strengths and weaknesses maybe a little bit later. We're not going to get into each question, but I think that is one of the things that kind of impressed me for his situation was the directness of those questions, the directness of where he was trying to go.
He did hit the nail on the head when he spoke. Mark Lamborn, though, again made, along with Jim Neighbors' line, said unify city government, to work as a group, just really to try to unify city government. And right now I think that, and I'm going to say something here. This is my opinion, all right, based on just what I've observed.
Well, it is an opinion-based show.
It is an opinion-based show, but city government, from an employee standpoint, is fairly unified right now.
Right.
We saw this.
We saw that this week.
We saw that this week. We saw that with an alleged sick out of people that were making a statement, and we also saw it with a petition that was signed by 300 plus employees. So I think from an interdepartment employee standpoint, they are very unified. Now, where I think these gentlemen are seeing the unity that their lack of unity, disunity that they're alluding to, I would say, is probably within the council and the mayor, in that upper tier of government. The point.
The leadership.
The point on the pyramid.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. The mayor and the council.
Now, we got through those four on that question. I'm gonna skip down to question number 3 because I think it's in the same basic area, which is the finance director.
Yeah.
And they asked an interesting question. What do you as mayor bring to the table?
Yes.
And that one, I don't think that some of the people actually understood that situation.
They did. Now, I will say this. I think Mr. Neighbor did answer that well.
Oh, well, I mean...
all he had to do is throw his resume on the table.
That becomes obvious.
Drop the mic.
Yeah, at that point in time,
yeah.
I put down simply CPA when it came to him.
Exactly, and again, Mark Lamborn had a very strong statement there. I run my own company. We negotiate multi-million-dollar contracts with military bases.
That impressed me from the standpoint of, okay, you're not just talking about a small...
Now, I will say this. I noticed a couple of times in this particular... Mark Fuller went right to the job description of the mayor. And he said, you know what? That's really not my department. He said, my department is to oversee the department heads and do the day-to-day duties of the city, manage the utilities. The 3 job descriptives of the mayor, he went right to that. So
because actually the finance director
correct
works for the city.
That's right.
They work in conjunction with the mayor to make sure that things stay on track.
Because they have a very, very close
They're hand in hand.
Right. So I thought it was interesting. He went right to that, which makes me, stay from that standpoint. He said, that's really not a question I need to answer in that sense. That's not my job. We have a position in the city that is supposed to be doing that.
Is that part of some of the problem now that maybe
I don't know. That was alluded to. In fact, let me flip back over here to the very end. I think that was alluded to. Let's see. Well, I don't want to sit here and try to waste time looking for, but there was somewhere along the lines, one of the candidates said in their closing remarks something to that effect of not meddling outside of the area you're supposed to meddle in.
One of the things that kind of turned me off a little bit tonight on that particular question,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't think he meant to do it, and I think he felt as if it was important that he went down that road,
Mm-hmm.
was the whole issue that the mayor and the finance director had with Shaw. I don't know if I would have taken that same opportunity to go down that path.
I don't know.
It seems as if with me looking at him as a candidate and not
Mm-hmm.
the current mayor, I would have taken the approach of, I believe I can get this done.
It did appear a little vitriolic.
Okay.
I would agree with you. On the other hand, this is a big audience. There's a lot of, we use the term shakers and movers. You look around the crowd tonight, if you saw who was there, you'd understand what I'm saying. Any of you that weren't there, if you had been there, you would look around and you knew the people that were there.
Alex City's who's who?
A lot of them.
Okay.
A lot of people that have, and a lot of concerned citizens, not just, shakers and movers, but concerned citizens, which really are the shakers and movers in a society. So when you look around at the people that were there, I just lost my train of thought. I forgot what you said.
Which Shaw?
You got me sidetracked. Oh yeah. Well, it was his chance to jump on the stump and try to clear the air on that.
Okay.
And so on one hand, I know what you're saying. You say, well, there really wasn't a time and place for it. Then again, when is there not a time and place for it?
And I guess from my standpoint, and again, I was looking at everybody on the same level.
Right.
And I did give him some credit for being mayor, but I kind of wanted to hear what is the next 4 going to be like. And I got that this was a barrier in this 4 for him, but I don't know I would have spent as much time.
And let me ask you this. How do you think that's going to affect the council forum? Because it's the elephant in the room for them right now, because you look at our council currently, it is literally divided down the middle.
Well, it's the first question that they're going to have to ask when they got one question, which is who is going to be the council president. Right after that, they'll go.
They're going to ask them that question?
They have to vote on it.
They're going to ask them that as a public question?
No. Not that, I'm talking about if they get voted in. I'm sorry. If they get voted in as council person, the first thing they'll have to do is come up with a council president.
Right.
The next thing that they'll have to do is figure out who keeps their jobs and who doesn't.
Oh,
I'm sorry, I moved ahead to.
I thought you were saying they were going to ask the question at the council forum, who are you going to pick for your president?
No.
Okay.
No.
Woo!
No.
That was like.
No, but I mean.
That's a pretty pointed question.
That's a very pointed. Because that couldn't even work with our current council.
The last council really struggled. No, you do it. No,
that was several times. No, it was 2 people, and they went 3-3.
I know.
Several times.
That's what I'm saying. No.
But I mean, I don't know how they're going to not answer how they might solve some of those issues in that situation. Let's move on down the line a little bit more. One of the other questions that I thought was interesting, I'm not really, that confused me a little bit.
Which one was that?
And no one really answered this question except for Mark.
What number was it?
It was the next one, but it was the new revenue question.
Let me find it right here.
It was number 4. It was a new revenue question.
Okay, what assets can we leverage to pump more money into the city coffers? I think that was basically, literally how it was worded. Or do that without raising taxes. By instead of raising taxes to get more money, what can we do to leverage assets we already have to get more money.
The only person that even came up with a new...
They really, I think, I'm going to agree with you. They're of course, they also, we don't need to raise taxes. We're fine.
I got that, but that was part of the question.
That's right. That was actually, they actually repeated the question to us. So I will say Mark Lamborn had a very interesting statement about possibility of processed water being used, right?
Things of that nature.
And gas utilities, there's a lot of things, and increasing tourism, because lodging tax is very, very high. It's one of the highest taxes in the state. And sales tax, now we have a 10% sales tax. So there's a huge factor there.
Fuller broke out and did say EDA and business growth, but it was kind of a periphery.
He did offer one solution that I thought was interesting.
Okay.
And having lived up north, up with the Yankees, I've lived in the Midwest and New England. He made the comment, and this is not something I'd heard before. This was new ground for me. He said, there's a lot of these union industries up there that could relocate down here as non-union industries to produce the same products or market the same items, and do it with a lower cost because of the non-union status, and raise the wage. And,
that's possible.
Yeah,
that's possible.
It was. I think that was really sort of an EDA, probably an EDA approach.
I think the last one that I wanted to kind of get into is question 7, which is the vote on alcohol.
Yeah, and you and I actually, we talked about this, I think yesterday or the night before. We had a little short conversation on that.
By the way, we don't get to talk much, so this is literally the first time.
That's right. we used to be on a local television show, Good Morning Lake Martin, and we lost our jobs there. So now we're broadcasting from the basement of Sean's house.
Oh, no. But, I mean, it looked at, I did, whether you agree with Shaw or not, I did kind of like Shaw's answer.
Listen, he made a great statement.
From the answer from an honest place.
The best statement of the night, literally, probably hands down, quote, to redeem from the first statement that he made, his last statement on that question, 7, he said, you can't save the city with alcohol money. And I totally agree with him. And now all of the other candidates,
they talked about choice. They talked about it'll bring in some revenue.
It's already personal choice, and now the vote is personal choice.
And I got that. But I thought that for Shaw to take a negative stand on not really wanting to be for alcohol, he cleaned it up well as to why.
Yeah, and everyone made this thing. It has to be used responsibly. Right. But I will say, he made that statement. You can't save the city with alcohol money. Dead on. Now, one thing that was, and Mr. Neighbors took the approach, that's an economic decision. It's just flat out, he's looking at it as a CPA.
Yeah.
It's an economic decision.
Well, he's money. So if there's a dollar coming in, it's helping.
And Mark Lamborn, again, saw it as, the taxes and the tourists and the industry, et cetera.
Fuller said he supports whatever they end up doing. He doesn't necessarily drink, from what I could tell.
But now he did make a real interesting statement too that I think was no one else touched on. Mark Fuller was essentially neutral on it. He said, listen, it's the people's choice. It's a democratic process to make this. It's what is that, a referendum now?
Yes.
It's in the people's hands. But he said if it passes, we need more than what's here, because if you're going to offer alcohol sales on Sundays, you need in place an infrastructure of restaurant and recreation and venues where that service can be really there's a word I'm looking for, not monopolized, but capitalized on. You know what I'm saying? That needs to be capitalized, and we don't necessarily have that right now. So that's something that both downtown and the 280 corridor, which Mr. Shaw pointed out, 25,000 cars per day blow through there, is something that needs to be expanded so that decision, if the decision passes to have Sunday alcohol sales, if it passes, the way to capitalize on that is have outlets for it, venues for it, and that's restaurants and pubs, restaurants, recreational areas that support it or sell it.
And I thought that was a long-term suggestion
and a good one
beyond just the vote.
Right.
In that situation,
and I like that. Now, there was one thing I want to clarify at the very end in the closing statements that I think maybe got missed, and it could have been partly because of the sound was a little bit strange.
Well, let's get to the closing in a second. There was one or two in the second, that segment just before.
Is this the resident question?
This is the resident question. Those questions were tough.
Now, let me back up to one thing before we go on. The 8th question got totally missed by all the candidates. The question was, how can we use our schools and school system?
So you caught that too, huh?
Yes, as a recruiting tool for individuals, and what's the city's role in supporting schools to educate the workforce? What you're asking for there, the real question was, how can we take our school system from cradle to cap and gown, and then into our 2-year college system, which is here, which is being completely underutilized right now, not recognized as the economic engine it could be, which is interesting. That was not brought up tonight at all, except in that question. And I think all the candidates kind of veered, they missed. And I don't think it was intentional. I think they didn't understand the gist of that question. But the question was, how do we use our educational system as a recruiting tool for industry with our workforce, both with high school, technical degrees, CAC, Central Alabama Community College, and then on to 4-year schools that people want. That question was not answered. There's a little bit of the gateway this and the gateway that. And we have CAC.
They stuck with just. I honestly believe that they didn't really grasp that particular question, because all of them ended up kind of missing the recruitment piece from cradle to grave on that whole deal.
Right, and I think that question. That question was kind of a throwaway to me at that point, because it just wasn't.
Now, the next segment of questions was real interesting when they started out of the gate with a big controversial issue here in the city, which is basically, paraphrasing again, manager or not.
Would you hire, if you were the mayor, do you support a city manager or no city manager?
And 2 of them said yes.
It was a split. Yeah, 2 yeses.
Which I thought was an interesting deal, because you had Lamborn and Neighbors, I believe, said yes.
Yep.
Now, the mayor obviously said no.
Well, and he did make a comment. He said a mayor and a council that work together can do that job just fine.
And see, that's kind of where I fall. Not saying that I agree with the 2 of those situations. I kind of fall into that mindset of if everything is working like it's supposed to, you vote out the problem.
That's right.
And
that's right.
You move on.
Right.
With a city manager, my position has always been it's a lot tougher to get past that, because those positions become politically protected.
They can. I don't know.
They can be.
Yeah, I don't know though. Is in this situation, if you have a city manager, a professional manager, they're actually an employee of the city council, are they not?
Not necessarily.
Or the employee of the.
They can be just the employee of the city at that point in time.
Okay.
They would become under contract.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Under a different department or department head.
Again, it's all depending on how that group.
And I do know that has to be changed on, I think, a state
legislative
level, right? You can't just decide to do that one week and next week you have that form of government. That's actually a legislative process. We can't do that now.
But what's strange about that question is that no one seems to be talking about, and this kind of pointed into it with the budget side of the question, is that if you're for it, you're basically reducing the mayor's job to more of a part-time role.
In a sense, yes. Yeah, depending what the mayor job description is.
You wouldn't really need to do a lot of the day-to-day, which is what the mayor would essentially be.
And I come from a position prior to living here in a city that had a city manager, and they had a city council, and the mayor was actually the chairman of the city council. Basically, he was what we would call the chairman.
He's like the deciding vote at that point.
He's exactly what he is. And he had a little bit more of an expansive social role, hug necks and kiss babies, etc., cut ribbons. But the city manager managed the day-to-day tasks of the city. So,
pick a final question or two, and we'll get into the final comments on them and move on.
One of the questions that I wanted to bring up, I thought it was interesting. The only place I saw a little bit of, I'm not going to use the word animosity because I did not see any animosity in this event. It was professional across the board from all four gentlemen. But there was just one or two little swipes taken at one point, and I was.
Did it kind of remind you of the GOP?
That wasn't quite that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nobody was comparing
just
anything
curious.
else.
Okay.
But one of the questions, and I was a little surprised they asked this question the way they did. They asked the question, Mr. Neighbors, and this is public record, went on record stating that if he were elected as the mayor, that he would refuse a salary. Excuse me. Which is approximately $60,000 a year for the two. You've got the administrative side of the mayor, and then you have the utility director also. So you got, I think it's a $45,000 and a $15,000 combination salary for about $60,000. And he said, I wouldn't take that salary. I'm financially in a position, I don't need that. Which Mayor Shaw had a great ending to that at the end.
I did have to give women. If nothing else, I had to give him credit for the comeback.
Yes,
Go ahead.
Great comeback. But he said, but the real issue of the question, I don't know that this was answered as well as I wanted it to be. The point was, Mr. Neighbors didn't really need to answer that question. He was already saving the city $60,000 by not taking a salary.
Correct.
It would stay in the general fund or wherever that would go. So, and he said, my person, I want to be a true public servant and give back to the community. Mayor Shaw basically said, you need the exchange of value in the salary for the work that you do, and that's what keeps everyone.
There are a lot of expenses that you don't anticipate, blah blah blah.
Right. Mark Fuller said he sure would take a salary because he would have to go to the job he has to do this job. Yeah. So and Mark Lamborn essentially said the same thing. But this is the one place Mark Fuller did take a swipe at Mr. Neighbors. He said, he essentially said, I think that's a way to get votes.
And I think Shaw also said, what was it that he said? We know how that worked out for the current person.
I think that's, and we're not going to go down that road.
Well, but I mean,
Governor of Alabama.
That's what he said.
Right.
So at that point in time,
and I think
it got a few chuckles and it went on.
Right.
But I did have to give him a little credit for that.
But one thing we do want to clarify, I think we need to clarify this here. That the comment was made later on. Mr. Neighbors did say, I kind of resent that remark.
To rebut it.
Yeah, in his closing statement, I resent that remark from the mayor. And the mayor didn't make that remark. I have that here as Mr. Fuller said that.
Yeah.
So I don't think they heard each other as well as they should have there. So that wasn't something that the mayor.
Who did the best on closing?
Let me go to my notes because the closings were. I thought the closings were interesting. Mr. Neighbors said his primary role in his closing statement was restore faith of Alex City residents.
Were you in here while I was writing all of this?
I was looking over your shoulder. I got a camera right there. No, it restore faith in city government by the residents, not talking about employees, talking about the residents. And he also took a moment to acknowledge the good work that the current department heads and the city employees have done, which I thought was great. But he did say an interesting statement. He said, "You don't have to win my trust; you can only lose it." So his very first, his closing statement to me was this statement. He said, "We need to get the financial house in order. I have spent 50 plus years in this community."
Right.
And he said, "I have the best qualifications to do that."
Yep.
When he was speaking about the financial situation currently.
Lamborn to me had a more inclusive statement.
His closing statement was excellent.
That's what I mean. Yeah. When it comes to closing statement.
Yeah, he closed the deal.
Now, I would say that he covered the issues that had not even been brought up in the forum and gave some quick ideas as to how and what he wanted to do.
And I'll say this too, in his closing statements, he said Alex City is still alive. And he made a very pointed statement that I think is the reason that we're here today, that the Outlook is writing articles and editorials, that people are getting sick out in City Hall. There's a reason all this is taking place, and it was this statement he made. This election is pivotal for Alex City.
Yep.
It's huge right now. And I think I saw an editorial in the Outlook from Sunday, I believe it was from Sunday, that essentially said the same thing. This is a pivotal election for the city. It's big. This is big for us. Big.
Fuller, you got this understanding. I like that he brought out his son was committed to Christ in that situation. Fuller was just matter of fact in all the different things.
And he brought up two interesting things. In one, he did bring up the fact he's been on city council before.
Yes.
And a lot of
people,
then
he knows those.
Right. He knows the rules. He knows the plan. He knows the city. The governmental schematic, if you want to use that term. He understands that, that's a good experience. That's something that he can offer that isn't necessarily. I mean, I don't know that anyone else up there has been a city council person before. Right. So if they have, I speak in error and I apologize. But he did bring out the fact that some of the things that have been achieved, and we mentioned this earlier, under Mayor Shaw's time frame here, were actually started prior to his election 4 years ago. So I think he was that was a little bit of a rebuttal that took place. Fuller, Mark Lamborn didn't really rebut anything. He didn't really have anything to rebut.
No, they now, Shaw to me ended up being basically, and this is not a knock on him in that situation, this is kind of how the rebuttal came across. I mean, not the rebuttal, but the closing statement came across. We're basically going to go down the same path. We're in good shape. In fact, I use those two words because that's kind of what I got.
And again, that was his, and that's where I think that why he took the time to clarify that, and I'm kind of reading between the lines with him on this. He took the time. He did take the time here also to throw a few darts at the outlook.
Yes.
In his closing statements, he made the statement that positive
media in general.
Right. He made the statement positive news never makes the front page, and misinformation was never retracted or put in errata. In the printed paper, maybe it showed up somewhere online.
And to a degree, he has some points.
I would say he does.
I mean, whether we agree with where he is right now, what he's doing, a lot of where, as you pointed out, trying to figure out and write all of this stuff tonight.
It's complicated.
It's complicated.
To be a reporter and be accurate.
And, the news media quoted me on a 10-second deal.
That's because you're a community activist.
Right. I was like, where did this community activist thing?
You're my new community activist.
Yeah. So, after a 10-minute interview, you get about 10, 20 seconds.
Same thing happened to me the week before.
Yeah. So, we talked about that, something like what we're doing is a little different where you get to hear the whole story.
Right.
And it's unedited in that situation.
That's right.
Now, real briefly, we both kind of have our own strengths and weaknesses and analysis of each candidate overall, even outside of this situation. Let's just run down the group right quick and kind of give where their strengths lie and some of their weaknesses. But if they have anything major that's standing out there, we'll start in the order that kind of they went in. I guess it was Shaw on the left. I think that Shaw has I've said this on multiple occasions, I think that Shaw has an opportunity to win it because
I agree.
Where he has gone into the black community, where he has been active in various other areas with the older group and a lot of other things. We don't really know yet how any of this will affect him.
I would agree with that. I would agree. That this is sort of the unseen. But the other thing, too, that Shaw also, I think that there's people that are giving him some credit on this side. And this is just me asking around town about all these guys, because I'm pretty active about it and talking and discussing. There are people who feel like that Mayor Shaw hasn't got he
didn't get a fair shake.
That's exactly the word I wanted to use, but I was trying to be more professional.
Yeah. This is internet TV.
That's right.
We don't have the same restrictions that we did with the FCC.
There you go. He didn't really get a fair shake in the sense that he's been working with a very clearly defined, divided, split council most of his term.
His argument has been it's an obstructionist council.
Right, and so he's, it's like tug of war all the time. And that, I think there are people that are giving him some credit and saying, we don't really know. And I've made this comment myself. And I'll say it publicly. I don't take back anything I say. I would be interested to see a Shaw term with a council that worked fully with him as opposed to some of the divisive work.
And not knowing where the issues really are.
That's what I'm saying. And I'm not saying I agree or disagree all the time with these three or those three or these four or these two. That's not the point here. I'm just saying that it has been difficult for, if I were Mayor Shaw, right now, me speaking as a man, as a leader, I would be saying, wow, I can't even show these people what I can do because I keep banging into these barricades.
Now, I will say this. Even on my polls, I give him more credit because a lot of the individuals that would have taken the poll are not his supporters in a lot of cases.
Right.
They're not social media people.
Yeah, I understand.
So that's why I've got to be careful because I don't want to give the false impression in that situation that he is behind when in some cases he could actually be doing well because there's a third of the vote and a fourth of the vote that's silent in that situation, and they just haven't.
I agree, and I've said this, and I'll say this too.
Okay.
I'll say this. I think personally, this is me guessing based on my own little poll of asking people. He has a 50-50 shot of being in as mayor.
Yeah.
Based on the same thing you're talking about.
Yep.
That silent vote.
The group that he has focused on and has not lost any support from what I can tell.
Right.
Now let's briefly go through some of the others too because I don't want to. We need to wrap up in a second.
We're boring people. Boring me. I'm boring myself.
But let's look at Fuller.
Okay.
I think Fuller
most direct. On some stance, the most direct, to the point, clear, concise answers.
If you're looking
in many
for
areas.
Organization, if you're looking for discipline, I use that word with you
earlier. Right. And we don't mean that in a negative sense.
No. This is just if you want somebody who you believe truly will walk in day one and start cleaning up and organizing and making sure that the system runs like
I see Mr. Fuller, and I've known him for a number of years. I have tremendous respect for him as a law enforcement officer. He does a great job on the lake. But Mr. Fuller has always been very consistent, and he's always been very direct. And you always know where you don't have to wonder where he stands on an issue when it comes to right and wrong or black and white. And I don't mean that racially. I'm saying just the difference between this and that.
Now, that's his strength.
Right.
But I also am not sure if he will be able to back it off.
Is there time for some gray?
And how will he perform in the gray?
It could be. It would be interesting.
Because not everything is going to be black and white.
Right. And
now I will say this. Yeah. As a council person, he did an awesome job. I'm in his district, was in his district. And
he was before my time.
He actually is a very knowledgeable and decisive governor. When I say, he governs pretty much like
it sees clearly where things are.
I just don't know if when it comes to those gray areas, if we'll see officer or if we'll see mayor in that situation.
And I understand that.
All right.
And I think, and we talk about Mark Lamborn, and I really think when you just look at the thing tonight, he really offered short-term solutions, long-term plans.
He has the vision.
He works around all day, every day. He knows
to me,
the deal.
Of the three, he has a vision
long-term
for Alexander City. If you're looking for that, it may just not be his time because I don't know if the vision. I can't see if the finances ain't right at that point in time. Does that make sense?
No, I understand.
And
that has to be cleared up.
And at some point, I believe he could do it. I believe that he would do a good job. But it depends on what's in your mind when you're voting. He has a definite, clear vision for what he'd like to see for Alex City.
But there's a hurdle, clearing up that financial miasma that we have right now. That has to be hurdled. That has to be cleared before that can take place.
I think he can do it. I think he's a professional individual. I think that he has the capability.
Successful company.
And I think he has the capability to pull it off. Like I said, I don't know if the voters want a visionary right now or if they just want something to get stuff done. Which kind of leads me into neighbors.
Right, and I think this is what if I were Jim Neighbors and I wanted to get elected as the mayor of Alex City right now, I would beat the financial drum until I split the top of it.
Oh, yeah.
I would,
yeah.
because it's the front page of the paper, it's the front page in WSFA, it's social media. Right now, that is the most. Now
it has been the most.
Right. If he beating and flashing that resume and beating that financial drum would be his avenue to the mayorship. Now, the downside to that could be exactly like we're talking about, if there's a downside with Mr. Fuller or Mr. Lamborn, and we'll finish up with the mayor, I guess, but it could be that do you have the ability to have the long-term plan, do you have we know he has the credentials financially to sweep up the pot. But the question is then once that's out of the room,
what happens then?
Right, let's talk about 5, 10, 15.
But he has the corporate background
sure
to potentially be able to pass pass beyond that. And I'll tell you, I don't care who you are and what Shaw and the rest of them said about that. Fuller is kind of right. One of the biggest gimmicks to get votes in that situation is not taking a salary.
And I'm going to give Fuller the credit for being honest about how he felt.
And again, that is the thing that I gave him a lot of upfront credit on, that he was just straight.
I got it, and then of course I got to get to my notes here because the closing statement, the mayor made a comment to that effect about you may want to change your mind if you ever get in there, Mr. Neighbors, on that salary position, because by the time you buy cakes and raffle tickets and sponsor baseball teams, you're going to need that $60,000.
Yeah. So, in closing, I think it was a great forum. I think it was
informative.
The one thing that I guess I've always wanted from forums is more information.
You want to walk away knowing something you didn't know.
And I did learn
something you didn't know.
I did learn a couple things. Like I said, I didn't know Neighbors prior to this. I feel like I got a little bit different I got an introduction to him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he helped in my vision for me personally. In this setting. Yeah, in this setting for me personally.
And I would say I think he's the kind of person that if you sat down across from each other at a desk, you would walk away from that situation and feel like you had you would feel like you learned something and feel like you felt something.
I guess I'm just looking for more time and a deeper dive into issues so that I can get a better deal.
And you know what? That goes back to the very first thing you said. When you took your little poll, what was the number one convincing influence on people was what? Personal relationships.
Personal relationships.
So.
Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate Doug Roberts coming and hanging out with me. We didn't even get into the alcohol and everything else. We had so much material on just the forum itself. I guess I'm going to have to invite you back so that we can talk about some of this other stuff. But again, get out there.
Vote, please.
Vote. But before you vote, register. Apparently they stopped 10 days before.
It's today.
I think it was today, but just in case, you go ahead, download it, fill it out, and get it in. It might be the 10th. Okay. Because when I read the regulations, it said 10 days before. So it'd either be tomorrow.
10 business days.
See, I don't know. That's what. So either way, download it.
Yeah, go ahead and fill it. Maybe you can fill midnight.
Who knows? And get it in the mail. The other thing is, be sure that on Thursday you tune back in, and we'll try and do another one for the council deal, maybe a little shorter because it's a lot more of them, so we'd have to be a little bit more compressed.
Yep.
And then don't forget to actually go and vote. If you're not going to be in town, do your absentee ballots. But in either situation, make sure you are an informed voter and continue to watch the Centrist. Either on YouTube or follow us on Facebook. But in either case, Doug,
thanks buddy. Always a pleasure.
Look, good being back on camera with you.
Two shaking heads talking about something or other.
Yes, and till the next time, continue liking our Facebook page. And if you don't mind, become a subscriber so that you can get updates as to when we put new content out on YouTube. Till the next time, We'll see you later.
Good night.